Good morning, Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning Five here on Monday, July 12th, 2021. I am Dave Biddle. I'm very happy to be joined by Patrick Murphy. A lot to get into, Patrick. Let's start with, we're going to give our top 10 active head coaches in college football. What sparked this idea, Bucknutters? Well, Pro Football Focus College, who overall does a good job, they came out with a list of the top 10 coaches in college football. And Ryan Day was not on that list. And listen, if they're saying, well, the reason is because he's only been there for 2 years. Well, Lincoln Riley's only been there, 4 years? He was high on the list. And Ryan Day's accomplished more than Lincoln Riley, in my opinion. But so Patrick and I are going to give our own list, our own top 10 list. Patrick, if you don't mind, I'll go first. And then you can follow up with probably the better of the two lists here. All right, here's my list. We're going to go 1 through 10.
Let's see.
We're not going to go in descending order here. We're going to go 1 through 10. All right, number 1, to no surprise, is Nick Saban. Whether you love him or hate him, and if you're listening to this show, you probably hate him. You got to respect him. He's not just the best active coach in college football. He's the best coach in college football history. So Nick Saban, number 1. Number 2, Dabo Swinney. I don't like Dabo, but you got to give him his props. Okay, you got to give him his props. Clemson was known for Clemsoning before he got there. He's won 2 national championships. And I do think Ohio State's passed them. I really do. I mean, you look at how Ohio State's out-recruited them. They beat the brakes off of them last year. 2 years ago, Clemson won, but I thought Ohio State was a better team. So I like where Ohio State's at compared to Clemson, but you got to give it right now to Dabo with his 2 national titles and what he's done there overall. Number 3, Ryan Day. Give me Ryan Day, number 3. And I think there's a clear top 3. I really feel like there's a drop-off after 3. I love what Ryan Day's doing. Some people might say, well, he's got to win a national championship to be that high on the list. No, he doesn't. The next few guys on my list have not won a national championship. The first 2 guys have. And I've got a couple guys who've won national championships on the list, down the list, at least one that I don't know. I don't even think it's that good, but I'll get to him in a minute. All right, so I've got Saban, Dabo, and Day. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to go through these kind of fast. All right, number 4, like I said, there's a pretty big drop-off from 3 to 4 to me. I'll give it to Lincoln Riley, though. Even though I said, Days outperformed him, Lincoln Riley's still a good coach, and I would not mind him coaching my favorite program at all. I have him number 4. Number 5, Brian Kelly. I don't know. I have Brian Kelly, number 5 from Notre Dame. He's done a good job at Notre Dame. Not a great job, but a good job. Number 6 is Matt Campbell. I like Matt Campbell a lot. I have Matt Campbell, number 6. Number 7 is Dan Mullen. I'm impressed mostly with what he did at Mississippi State. I mean, Mississippi State, he did a really good job there. We'll see at Florida. He's been okay at Florida so far, but I have Dan Mullen at number 7. All right, number 8, Jimbo Fisher, won the national championship. He was the guy I was talking about. I'm not a huge fan of him, but he did win the national title at Florida State, doing pretty good so far at A&M. So I'll give it to Jimbo Fisher. All right, number 9, I'll put Kirby Smart here, just because of the way Georgia's recruiting, but he's got to prove it on the field. I mean, it seems like his teams underperform. I'll put him in the top 10, though. I'll put Kirby Smart 9th. And then 10th, I considered a lot of guys here, but I'm going to give it to Pat Fitzgerald from Northwestern, winning 2 Big Ten West titles in the last 3 years. And just overall, what he's done at Northwestern has been impressive. And he has had many, many opportunities to leave, and he has stayed there. So I will give Pat Fitzgerald the final spot on my list. There you go, Mr. Murphy. All right, Patrick Murphy, give us your top 10.
Our lists are pretty similar to start with. Actually, they're very similar to start with. I had Saban at number 1, like you said. I don't think there's an argument there. I think it's very clear who the top coach in college football is, and I agree with you, college football history. Dabo after him, 2 national titles. It's hard to argue with how he has turned that Clemson program into a national power, on par with programs that have been historically good, like Alabama, Ohio State, those guys. So Ryan Day, I had number 3. I think I understand the argument for, he's only been there 2 years. I want to see it, especially if you're outside of Columbus or outside of Buckeye Nation. I obviously think he's a great coach. I was trying to figure out if I should put him lower so it didn't look like it was, a bias, but I was really looking at the rest of these guys and I was like, no, I think he's the 3rd best coach. If I were hiring a coach it would be, I may even hire Ryan Day after Nick Saban just because of, he's younger and what he's accomplished so quickly. But, I think in terms of this list, I thought that it made more sense to put him second. And then Lincoln Riley third. I think similar to Ryan Day, the way he has, stepped into a program that already had a ton of success and was able to maintain it. I think sometimes people take that away from those guys because the program already had success. And I don't think that's fair. If you're able to maintain or even build on in what Ryan Day's done, and to some degree, Lincoln Riley, I think that is just as difficult to handle that type of pressure as it is to, build up a program. Now, after that's where we start to differ a little bit, Dave. I went with our boy Fitz at was that 5. I just think that, you touched on it, but what he's able to do at a program like Northwestern, the fact that he's been in 2 Big Ten championship games, has been a contender in that division multiple times, even when they haven't won it. I appreciate that loyalty. I do think if he weren't a Northwestern guy, if, that's just where he started his career, he'd have moved on and ended up in a bigger, more powerful program, and we'd be talking about him in a different light. But I do think it's important to have him in the top 10. I just really like him. I also think, having interviewed him now a handful of times, personally, I really like the guy. Jimbo Fisher is next. I do think that national championship plays a big part. Obviously he's moved on to a new program from Florida State to A&M and continued to have success. I think it's obviously difficult there, being in the SEC, especially a team that moved into the SEC, but that program has continued to do well. Then I went Mac Brown, and I think, what he was able to do at Texas, obviously Texas is a huge program, but that Vince Young national championship game may be my favorite. I actually just watched it the other night because it was on replay. One of my favorite games. But then, retiring, coming back and starting to build that North Carolina program up, I think probably faster than most people expected, in the way that they've been recruiting and things. So he's up higher on my list than probably many. Brian Kelly, same thing you said, has done obviously well. I think at a program like Notre Dame, I think maybe he's underachieved a little bit. I think people probably thought, okay, you bring a coach in like that, let's talk national titles. And he's been in the playoff, but it just hasn't gone well. I think at some point he needs to get a playoff win to stay on this list. I went James Franklin. Again, I think what he's established at Penn State, obviously still a good program, but, to have beaten the Buckeyes, to won a conference title, to become that number 2 team in the Big Ten, probably most years over Michigan, I think is an accomplishment. I do think he needs to bounce back in a big way this year. Obviously last year was a down year, and I'd say it's in a weird season in general, but for the most part, I think James Franklin is very high on this list and a guy I would consider if I were hiring a coach. And then I went Matt Campbell. I've never been as high on him as other people. I mean, still a top 10 coach, obviously, in my mind at number 10 here. But, I think I would like to see it someplace other than Iowa State before I really jump on him, which I know contradicts maybe some of what I said about Fitz. But, that I think he's a very good coach. I would like to see it more consistently and maybe at a bigger program.
I like the Mac Brown pick. That's one that was an oversight for me. I might put him in there instead of Kirby Smart. In fact, I'm going to do that if I can redo my list. I'm going to put
Kirby Smart's.
No, I put him in there because he is recruiting well, but he just has his teams, and he's their perennial top 10 team. And if I'm hiring a coach, though, man, I mean, I would hire a lot of coaches before Kirby. I'm going to put Mac Brown ahead. I'm going to put Mac Brown on there because I kind of forgot about him because of everything. You can't just look at what he's doing now, although he's doing really well at North Carolina. The way he's recruiting, he's turned them around right away. I mean, they weren't a terrible program when he got there, but he's elevated them just in the couple of years he's been there. Yeah, I'm going to redo my list on the fly here and put Mac Brown in there instead of Kirby Smart. All right, well, good list. We had the same top 3, which is really what it's all about. Same top 4. We both had Saban, Dabo, Day, and Lincoln Riley. Saban, Dabo, Ryan Day, Lincoln Riley, 1 through 4 for Patrick and I. All right, switching gears. Let's talk some recruiting. Over the weekend, Zion Branch, very high 4-star safety from Bishop Gorman in Vegas, which is turning into a little bit of Ohio State pipeline. He came out with his final 5. It's Ohio State, Bama, Clemson, Oklahoma, and USC. Here's the good news for the Bucknutters out there for Zion Branch. 77% of the crystal ball picks are Ohio State, but two names that you're very familiar with are included in that list: the dean of Ohio State football recruiting and the national director of recruiting for 24/7 Sports, Steve Wiltfong. Both have put crystal ball picks in for Zion Branch. You have the dean and the Fong crystal ball Zion Branch to the Buckeyes. I don't want to say that makes it a done deal, Patrick, but that makes it pretty close to a done deal in my opinion.
Sure. I mean, if there's two guys that I trust, I trust a lot of the guys in our business and especially within our company, but those are two guys that usually don't make their picks, especially at Wilt Fong has it high, Bill has it high, in terms of their degree of certainty. So, like you said, I certainly trust both of those guys in that one. And, this is a name that's kind of floated around with this Ohio State class for a while. Obviously would be a huge pickup for the Buckeyes. You have to think that our guys here have kind of done their homework, despite him being out west. And I certainly trust their level of confidence in this one. And I think Buckeye fans should too.
And the rich get richer. Friday after we recorded the show, so about Friday afternoon, George Fitzpatrick, the 4-star offensive lineman from Colorado, who's really blowing up. I mean, you look at where he's ranked. He's ranked as a top 300 overall player in the country, like a top 25 offensive tackle. He's underrated, though, when you look at his offer list. I mean, everybody pretty much wanted him. Buckeyes got him. This 2022 class looks spectacular. Now, they're number one in the country by a mile right now. Now, last year was kind of the same thing. It's funny looking at this. So George Fitzpatrick, 6'6", 285 pounds. He's in. They now have their second offensive lineman. I still think they want to get two more, not just one more in this class. We'll see what happens. But I'm curious to get your take on this. Last year, they had a big lead in the recruiting rankings, and they finished second. Seems like that happens to Ohio State a lot. They finished second nationally, and those end up being fantastic classes. So as I've said on the show before, give me all of these number two classes that when we look back on them, really were the number one class. Like 2002, I'm going to go way back on you. 2013, 2017, all of those classes, if they re-ranked them, would be number one. They finished number two. Do you think this is a year when you look at how big of a gap Ohio State has, and it's not that early, they have 17 prospects in the class already. We won't know until February when the dust settles, or maybe later than that if there's another Jake Tuimoloau out that doesn't commit till July. But do you think this will be the year, 2022, where Ohio State holds on to that number one national recruiting ranking?
It's looking really good. I mean, as you mentioned, they are head and shoulders. The Buckeyes are above, Penn State at number 2, Notre Dame at number 3 right now. I think the thing that always, if you buy into this, the top class thing, Alabama's sitting there at number 11 with 10 commits, and that the Crimson Tide always close well. I think, for people who watch the signing day shows and stuff like that, there's always a lot of guys considering Alabama and committing to Alabama on that final, whether it's the early signing period or not. I feel like that's, and the SEC in general, I feel like a lot of those guys wait until that, or even, the all-star games and things like that. So I think that's, you always kind of see where Alabama is. You mentioned this happened last year, but this Ohio State class is just remarkable. I've written something recently about, Ryan Day and kind of proving, and his staff proving themselves as recruiters. And when I really started to look at this class specifically, and not to take anything away from the other classes he's had, it's just remarkable what they've built. And, again, still a relatively young coach in terms of, some of the guys he's recruiting against, but the way that this staff has been able to put this class together, you've got kind of a little bit of everything, 17 commits already, like we mentioned. And, even guys like a George Fitzpatrick, who I think, when the dust settles, who knows where he ends up ranking, but I think he's going to be very good, especially once he gets in the program, gets some weight put on him and things like that. So, as much as these rankings are great, and as Urban Meyer said, if they're going to keep score, we might as well try and win. That's right. I think what the Buckeyes do better than anyone else, or, with among the best in the country, I guess I'd say, is getting the guys that they think fits their program. And usually that lines up with the guys that are ranked really highly. But, maybe sometimes some of those guys that don't rank as highly come in, develop well, and turn into big time players. So I think that's just as important. But yeah, to answer your question, I think the Buckeyes can hold on here, but it is going to be, I do think teams will make it closer when we get down to the nuts and bolts of it at the end.
And last thing real quick, Ohio State basketball recruiting.
Yeah,
really transfer. I mean, which is the way it is now. It's like half your team is like guys you recruited, half your team's transfer. So get used to it if you're not ready, if you're not used to it already. But the Buckeyes landed a really good hoops transfer, Cedric Russell, basically to take the spot of Dwayne Washington, a young man from Louisiana, the Ragin' Cajuns, not LSU, from Louisiana, averaged over 17 points a game at Louisiana last year. Shooting guard. I don't think he's going to come in and be Dwayne Washington, but they needed another scorer, and I really like that Chris Holtman went out and found Cedric Russell from Louisiana.
This was an interesting one just because I think a lot of people just assumed Dwayne Washington would come back. I know that was what I kept saying was the expectation. I think EJ Liddell was the guy that more people thought was going to go to the NBA. So yeah, I think it was kind of, okay, we, not scramble mode necessarily, but, need to find someone and, a couple guys out there, but this was probably in my mind, looking at these guys, the best of the bunch. He can score like Dwayne Washington did, a good 3-point shooter. Numbers are actually even a little bit better than Dwayne's. And I know people ride Dwayne for his inconsistent up and down play. Chris Holtman has even made his comments about it, but you need a score. He was their leading scorer last year. And, without him, it was going to be a little bit tough. So getting a guard in here who will score, it'll be interesting to see the adjustment to the Big Ten level. But he's done it against big programs before. Baylor, I think he scored 20 some points against last year or 2 years ago, maybe. But a guy who can definitely light it up, can hit it from the outside, can get inside, handle the ball a little bit. So, obviously the fit will have to be there, and we'll see what the rotations look like. But I think they needed a guy who could do something like this, and they found one in Cedric Russell.
Great stuff from Patrick Murphy. Thank you very much, Patrick, and thank you to all listeners out there for tuning into the show. We appreciate that very much. Hope everyone has a great day. Let's hear that Buckeye swag, best damn band in the land.